Just because the DOJ and the FBI are compromised, that doesn't mean that the Epstein victims can't get justice elsewhere. In fact, there's something like 10 other countries that are already opening investigations into the files. And that includes some of our NATO allies. These countries include UK, France, Norway, Sweden, Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania. And that's just the start. And there are millions more files that need to be dropped that are probably going to pull in other countries and start their own investigation. Now, while the Trump administration is not going to be helpful at all and participate in doing things like extraditions for anyone who is found guilty of some heinous crimes in those countries, especially if they have Trump connections, or if they're currently working in the Trump government. These investigations, the warrants, the subpoenas that come from it, it's going to make it really hard for these elites to travel. It's going to complicate their business dealings. And if they own anything in those countries, they're at risk of things like seizure. And while it's great that these other countries and some of our allies are going to be doing these investigations, we should not leave it up to people outside the United States to fight for the Epstein victims. I would be surprised if Epstein files that are currently out today don't touch on all 50 states. And I'm sure they touch on every single major city in the US. And here's where you can make a difference. The Epstein Transparency Act passed not because Congress wanted to, but because the people demanded that Congress do it. So the American people have already accomplished something that's very difficult, getting Congress to pass a bill and have the President of the United States, Donald Trump, sign it against his own interests. So the hard part's done. Now, here's the easy part. When you call your state representative, or when 100 people call your state representative, or your governor's office, or your state's attorney general's office, they're much more likely to notice. Comparative to your member of Congress, they're much easier to influence. So if we take even a fraction of the energy that it took to get the Epstein Transparency Act passed at the federal level, we could probably get 50 state laws that demand transparency and investigations into the existing files. So whether you're in New York or California or Florida or Texas, even in the most cynical environment, both Republicans and Democrats want to weaponize these files to go after their political opponents. And I personally don't care if it's Democrats or Republicans. I want them both to be held responsible. And I think most Americans are on the same page. Now, remember what I said about these elites not being able to travel to other countries because of these investigations? Well, imagine if we're doing this at the state level too. If there are warrants and subpoenas for state investigations or major cities like New York City or Austin, Texas, it's going to make the guilty parties within the Epstein files, it's going to make it impossible for them to hide, for them to continue business as usual. So to make this super easy on you, so that you can actually make a difference, I'm going to tell you how. There's this guy named Christopher Armitage. He writes for a publication called The Existentialist Republic. And this guy has made sample legislation that can be passed in any and every state that demands transparency and investigations into the Epstein files as they relate to each state's relevant jurisdiction. I had a really good conversation with Chris Armitage for my On Offense podcast. If you want the details, make sure that you're subscribed to On Offense wherever you get your podcasts. For that episode, I'll drop everything that you need in the show notes, the direct links. Look, the wheels of justice turn slow, but you can help them build momentum. So if you want to do that, make sure that you're subscribed to On Offense.